Well, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name's Douglas Gautier. I'm the chair of AAPPAC and I'm also CEO of the Adelaide Festival Centre. It's great to have you all with us. I think this is our fourth online conversation that AAPPAC and the Secretariat and the members have put together. And I think they've been extremely worthwhile. In fact, in many respects, I think even though we do it within the context of very difficult circumstances, these webinars have really given us a lot of information to share and compare. And I think if anything, the network has come closer together. And another point is that for another reason, I think the webinars have opened up the membership such that we can involve and hear from people right throughout the organisation. So in some ways, it makes the whole process more democratic, which is good. So after three conversations that we've had, for this session, we'll focus on international collaboration and touring opportunities coming out of COVID. A bit difficult at the moment, to say the least, but I think as we all know, there are travel bubbles beginning to open up, so that in some cases we're looking at a bilateral relationship between two countries or maybe more opening up. So the possibility of international artists and productions or artists and productions traveling internationally opens up. So that's something for us to start to explore today, because after all, the network, that touring possibility, of course, is the lifeblood for what we do. But at the same time, of course, I think we've all been able to stimulate our local artists, our local ensembles with our audiences, and that's been a good thing as well. But touring is something, international touring is something we hope can be back as a possibility before too long. So we'll talk about that today. It's a great pleasure also to have the Federation for Asian Cultural Promotion with us. As many of you remember, we had a joint session with the Federation, now chaired by Joe Sadek, an old friend who ran Georgetown Festival in Penang for many years, but also we've known him in many guises, I think, all of us, and he's a great friend and collaborator, and it's great that he would be part of this, and we welcome Federation members. And I think, our view is most definitely that that there is so much in common between the two organisations that we would want to see cooperation, much more cooperation in the future. So this is a good example of that. And Joe, I thank you again for encouraging your members to be part of this and to be engaged in it as speakers. So this session will be moderated by Liz Hawkins, the Director of Programming Development Venue Sales for our organisation, the Adelaide Festival Centre. And she has just put another feather in her cap by delivering the new old theatre for us, the renewal of Her Majesty's Theatre. So we're very, very grateful for that. So I hope this session will be beneficial to our members and colleagues. And Liz, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Douglas. Welcome to Beyond the Borders, the future of international collaborations and touring in the performing arts. As Douglas mentioned, performing arts venues around the world are starting to reopen their doors. We're welcoming the work of local and homegrown artists back onto our stages, and the future of touring and presenting international acts remains challenging, but seems to be hopeful. The majority of international borders still remain closed, but some are cautiously opening up as we all continue efforts to control the spread of COVID-19. So performance venues, promoters, booking agencies, and artists, we're all exploring new ways to enable international collaborations, to present new works and connect audiences beyond our own borders. So today we have invited key players in the industry to share their experiences, including the successes and challenges in creating meaningful and inventive solutions to connect artists to an international audience, but particularly how they facilitated international collaborations and partnerships while still continuing to navigate through a complicated maze of travel restrictions, border closures, and control measures. Our panel today consists of 5 powerhouse women from across this region and includes Barbara Scales, founder and president of Latitude 45 Arts based in Montreal, who works from artists, with artists from all over the world. Amy Sakai, director of international affairs, the new National Theatre Tokyo, responsible for, amongst many, many things, international touring. Liao Haoqing, manager of the programming department, Shenzhen Concert Hall, responsible for all programming, publicity, and marketing. Joyce Chow, general and artistic director of the National Taichung Theater, with her impressive track record in producing, curation, and international touring. And Margaret Yang, CEO of Hong Kong Sinfonietta, who has had 20 years working and touring with this company, as well as other prestigious arts organizations. Now, this is a huge topic and it's a really big conversation. So we have a conversation and a combination of venues, companies, and producing agents, but we've invited them to speak for 5 minutes. They're each going to get a warning, they've been timed, to ensure that we have plenty of time for questions. So bear with me, we want to go through all of our speakers. It's such a diverse group and they have such important things to say. So please, any of your questions, put them into the chat section and we will get to them. We should have about half an hour left for questions at the end. But now to start our virtual conversation, please welcome to the stage Barbara Scales.
Thank you very much, Liz and Douglas and Joe and the AAPPAC team in Singapore, Rochelle and Jacqueline. I want to say first that I'm really, truly honored to be here to speak about the future of international touring. Let me start by saying that one of the things which has always inspired me about my work as an artist manager and agent is the sense that by bringing artists from one country to another, I am in some small way helping to participate in increasing international understanding and a deeper sense of our common humanity. And a world of concerts and live arts is something I long for, but it would be a wish only partially fulfilled if we were not able to have our performers able to travel freely and to share their work. So let's talk about international touring. First of all, why tour internationally? Well, from the artist's perspective, it is, of course, it is a wonderful opportunity to share a gift that they have developed over their lifetimes and a work that they have developed for this occasion, perhaps. It's their practice, it's their vision, and it's their creation. For them also, it is to share this work in a room with other people, to get the vibe. Jacqueline, could you show the first photo, please? The joy of the celebration. This is a photo of pianist Louise Bessette at the premiere of a piece by Armenian-Canadian composer Petros Shajunian with an orchestra in Laval, and just that sheer joy of the pleasure of being together, something most of us haven't seen for quite a while. When artists tour, they learn about the places where they've gone to perform. They learn about the people. They learn about perhaps the traditions, even if they're similar or very different from the ones that they know. They learn the languages. They learn about practices in art and in life. From the perspective of the audience is able to enjoy these gifts and visions and projects and the creations of the artists who have come to see them, to perform for them. And in best circumstances, they may stay for a while and give a class or have an opportunity to hear the artists speak or talk about their work or their lives. So to see this artist live, to see the artist and the work which they have heard or been made aware of by accounts in print or recording, in audio or video or in interviews, and to embrace the person or the people who are performing, and then to celebrate the artist, to stand and applaud. To stand and applaud the artist, the work, the occasion, the excitement of the moment, and to live a total experience. So it's very important for the audience to have this sense of the international coming to them. For governments and for business, it's also important. I think we can go back to the outline now. Thank you. For governments and business, it's very important. It gives a government or business or sponsorship pride, bragging rights. In Canada, the principle of culture as a part of Canada's foreign policy is deeply ingrained. It is one of the three pillars, along with trade and defense. Culture is the third pillar of Canada's foreign policy. And embassies around the world, the Canadian embassies around the world, speak of people-to-people diplomacy. So what are the challenges of touring internationally? Well, at all times, there are challenges. There are challenges of distance. There are challenges of people needing to travel, of time changes, adaptation. There are costs of the travel, of hotel, and costs of sometimes adapting, whether it's electricity or production, to the size of a stage or the language of the audience. There's also the challenge of the rapidity of the visit, that the artist is on tour, plays, performs perhaps for a night or a couple of nights, and then moves on. And this is a challenge, really. But in COVID times, the challenges, as we have seen, are much more extensive. We have the challenges of closed borders. We have the challenges of needing perhaps health certificates, health insurance. There are health risks for the artists in traveling and getting on a plane or a bus or into a car. There are challenges of risks in hotels, also in performance venues, in the backstage areas. There are, of course, some solutions that we've been trying to experiment with, certainly in Canada, in Montreal, in North America, and in Europe. There are some live concerts, but mostly live concerts come in combination with streaming, perhaps, or sometimes there's nobody in the hall with the artist and it's just an all streamed concert. Only available online. Sometimes we call it a hybrid concert with some people socially distanced in the hall. And sometimes we may have a pre-produced video. We've had also a series of lockdown concerts. Can we see the second photo, please, Jacqueline? So this is a photo of an ensemble of 12 guitars playing each in their own home. And somehow this entire video was done it's a Monteverdi, piece of Monteverdi, The Arrival of the Queen of Sheba. And the syncing was done perfectly. It was really mastered beautifully, but it's a little bit, of course, artificial. It's very enjoyable, but it's not the solution to the future of concert making. And if we could see the third slide, we'll see the poster for a concert. I guess for you, it's tonight. It's Friday night, October 30th in Washington, DC at the Library of Congress. It's a live concert of Tambuco Ensemble. We can have virtual outreach. We can have master classes, we can have interviews. And sometimes we have garden concerts, outdoor concerts, but these solutions don't really find the answer to international touring. And I just want to take a minute to look at solutions in the future and start with the question, when is the future? We don't know, of course. We're all very eager. We're perhaps too eager. We have a battle with a virus, which we have to win first. We have to transition from closed borders. We have to deal with visas, health certificates, health insurance for traveling artists, quarantines. And we have to we have to deal with the question of trust. Trust by governments to have people from foreign countries come to our countries, trust in the venues to have artists, their technical staff or their entourage, and the public come into those venues, and the public has to trust as well. And one last thing I'd like to raise as we think about the future is the future of the sustainability issues, sustainability for the art, for the artists, and for the planet. And these are questions which will not go away, and they were coming to the foreground of our attention as people organizing international tours, even before COVID came to us. And they won't go away. We need to think about them now while we're planning for the future. Maybe to think about regional residencies, some people call it corridor touring, block bookings. Think about artists touring with more than one program so they can stay in a region or a territory for longer and play for various audiences without having to get back on airplanes every day or every 2 days. Find more ways to have outreach and target audiences in different ways. To make the one night stand of the concert life into something which is more sustainable, more meaningful for the artist and the community. It's just a question to think about for the future. Thank you again, and I look forward to our panel discussion as we move forward. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Barbara, for those provocations and giving us inspiration that there will be international touring, because we recognize that importance. Please welcome Amy Sakai from the New National Theatre of Tokyo.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, AAPPAC, for giving us this opportunity. New National Theatre Tokyo is a producing venue, meaning we produce most of our productions in-house, and the artistic decisions are made by our 3 artistic directors, one for opera, one for ballet, one for dance, and one for drama. And the management deals with the producing and administrative logistics. Now, before COVID-19, we usually started planning 2 to 3 years in advance, announced the whole season to the public 10 months before the season, and started selling tickets more than 6 months prior to the opening. So regardless of many hiccups bound to happen with every production, in terms of opening a new production almost every week in one of our 3 theaters, things used to work like clockwork. So this year, with the outbreak of COVID-19, the biggest challenge was how we could totally change the mechanism and the mindset of how we used to work, and to be as flexible as we could possibly be in order to adapt to the new ever-changing situation. During the time, we had to close the theatre for more than 4 months, from the end of February until we reopened with a drama production at the beginning of July. We have announced the cancellation of each production one by one, always ready to reopen again once the government gave us the go-ahead. Until eventually in April, however, we decided on a temporary suspension of all ticket sales and refund of all performances of the season, knowing that even if we were to reopen, there will be restrictions on the number of people allowed to gather at indoor venues. This resulted in having to cancel 20 productions, 106 performances to date. Amongst many flexible new approaches, if I were to give you just one example, I would like to talk about the new method of rehearsing in opera production. Most of our opera productions are in international collaborations, in the sense that we handpick all the creative staff and singers from who is most appropriate and suitable for each production from the whole opera industry around the world, regardless of their nationality. Benjamin Britten's A Midsummer Night's Dream was originally directed by David McVicar, premiered in 2004 at La Monnaie, which is an opera house in Brussels, where Kazushi Ono, our artistic director, being the musical director at that time. So the set of the production had already been sent before the pandemic, and we were initially planning to have a creative staff and singers come from Europe to create the production by including Japanese singers, our resident chorus, and a Japanese orchestra. However, while there were travel and visa restrictions, we decided to modify the staging in a new normal style, respecting social distancing and other COVID-19 prevention measures on stage. In July, 3 months before the scheduled opening, we have asked a Japanese conductor, Norichika Imori, to study the score. And in September, we eventually announced that all the cost of this production will be replaced by the artists who reside in Japan. Ms. Leah Hausman, the staging and movement director of the production, had suggested relatively at an early stage that we should think of an alternative method of rehearsing using online technology in case the travel restrictions prevented her from coming to Japan, which was eventually the case. This brave and innovative suggestion coming from the director was agreed by the whole team, and every aspect of staging was discussed with the Japanese assistant director's team of staff, and the logistics were tested out before entering the rehearsal period. Once rehearsal started in September, there has been continuous live online conversations with the singers, chorus members, along with the technical staff, by connecting the rehearsal room and the director residing in the UK. Ms. Hausman was using Zoom on PC, watching the live streaming of the rehearsal process via YouTube on her TV monitor at the same time, giving us feedbacks and notes. The usage of online technology not only became a useful tool to connect with the staff outside the country, but also connected everyone involved in the production and keeping the minimum number of people in the rehearsal room. And so after canceling 8 opera productions, and for the first time in 8 months, our 2020-21 opera season opened on the 4th of October with Benjamin Britten's A Midsummer Night's Dream. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. That's absolutely brilliant. And I think one of the questions later to all of you will be, how much of this technology will you continue with throughout your processes through, whether it's rehearsal or as you're planning and having to shorten those timelines and be more flexible. Now, please welcome Hao Qing from the Shenzhen Concert Hall.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all in this way. I'm Hao Qing from Shenzhen Concert Hall. So first of all, I would like to thank the chairman and AAPPAC for giving this precious opportunity to let us get together and talk freely in this way. So this is my first time to join in this panel, and we are very glad to share with you what's going on here in Shenzhen in mainland China. Next. We were the first venue in mainland China to reopen the venue for business after the outbreak of coronavirus at the end of March. So could you please turn to the next page? Thank you. At that time, this was the previous page, yes. At that time, this was really a thrilling news to the whole industry, not only in China, but also to our, gave great encouragement to our overseas partners. But we were expecting the international tour in the second half of this year can be continued. However, because of the outbreak in the global, all of our international projects has been canceled this year. So we have to new plan for our performance season, again, by inviting the Chinese artists. We held our first post-pandemic concert at the end of May with the capacity of 30%. And now as the situation is getting better here, so we now open at a capacity of 75%. And this may continue until next year. And in mainland China, around 54% of the venues have been reopened since the restoration of the approval to host commercial performances. There are 11,638 performances held nationwide, which is 77.43% of the number of the same period last year. In the past 8-day holiday of the National Day holiday and the traditional Chinese Mid-Autumn Festival, around 5,500 performances have been held in and outside the venues, and the number of the performers and the number of the audiences have reached 1.8 million, with the ticket sales at 360 million RMB. We can see most of the orchestras and the venues have launched their new seasons for 2020 to 2021. Next. Next page. These seasonal lists seem very international, showing our great expectations for the foreign artists. But at the same time, changes happen every day. We still can see new announcements of the concert changes because of the uncertainty of border control policy. But national tours are still under safe control. The Shenzhen Symphony Orchestra has become the first Chinese orchestra to start a national tour to 6 cities, including Macau. During this period, even though the pandemic has blocked our way to the outside world, it doesn't cut off our links in between us. We still have collaboration with our international partners. Next. Firstly, we maintain programming collaboration with our foreign partners by inviting their Chinese artists, composers, or producers to take part in our concerts. Secondly, like most of the venues and organizations do, we have established our own online program in the collaboration with partners home and abroad. But as the capacity of the venue is allowed to rise to 75%, we gradually reduce some of the online program, as live show is always the final aim. Thirdly, we are trying to introduce some international resources for art education. This is still under discussion, especially on the technical level. So let's see what the other Chinese venues do to make the industry more diverse and international. Next. Firstly, introduction of IP has played a key role during this period. For example, the Beijing Music Festival, one of the most renowned music festivals in China, presents 240 hours of non-stop high-quality music, including nearly 100 operas and nearly 1,000 classical music works on its club app, which has made a bold attempt to break the boundaries. The orchestra in residence, the Mahler Chamber Orchestra, has participated in this year's BMF by presenting their online concerts on this app. The BMF has spent a lot to introduce these music works by collaboration with companies like Universal Music Group, Sony Music, Nasos China, and so on. Next. On the other hand, digital program has become a new growth point. COVID-19 pushes us to become computer potatoes. In the first half of 2020 in China, the number of digital users of the online music streaming services have surpassed 8 million. A lot of presenters have made their choice in this field, and Shanghai Grand Theatre found its new way in this. Shanghai Grand Theatre is planning to introduce a new online project in collaboration with Broadway's live streaming platform, Broadway On Demand, as well as performances by the English National Opera and English National Ballet. The programs will be recorded in Shanghai and London before airing to audiences on streaming platforms. Unlike recorded performances, this project is tailored for online dissemination. The directors will invite Chinese and foreign artists and experts to demonstrate or comment on classic stage works. Next. Apart from these online explorations, we are always expecting the icebreakers in live shows. A piece of news has shocked the whole performing industry weeks ago that the musical Phantom of the Opera by the Paris Opera House will have its China tour from next February to March in more than 10 cities in China. This has been officially announced on the website of the Phantom of the Opera. So we learned that the authority and the presenter are doing their best to make this happen. And we hope we will eventually have a new start next year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hao Ching. I think for all of us in this situation, it's just so encouraging to see how many of your audience are coming back and feel safe and comfortable, because many of us are not at that point where we can welcome back that many people. So thank you so much. Now, please welcome Joyce from the National Taichung Theater.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Greeting from very pleasant, nice weather in Taiwan. Next slide, please. Yes, we never closed. I think due to the SARS in 2003, we all learned from our harsh lesson then. So this time when we're facing this pandemic, we are well prepared. So we never closed. None of the theater in Taiwan closed during this period. However, our capacity limited to 50% from March to May, but we reopened, for the old seat, the full house at the end of June. So we're quite lucky that we still can have our summer series or fall seasons. And the ticket sales in our summer series is really high, up to 98%, because our public, they are eager for the arts in their lives. So everybody rushed to the theater to have their enjoyment for the evening. And we also have this open air performances. However, no matter you are indoor or outdoor, you have to get the temperature check. You have to leave your contact information at the entrance, and you also have to have masks all the time. And currently our fall season is still running, but our program will adjust like 2 to 3 months according to the situation. So in the fall season, unfortunately, our European troops cannot come, and we open the venue to a local performing troops. So the hiring rate of our venue still very high. Almost fully booked for by the local performing art troops. Next slide. I would like to share with you some international touring, 2 schemes for foreign performer. Kunnu Pak, a pianist, well-known pianist, he will play 32 Beethoven piano sonata, and he will stay for 14 days quarantine. He said, as long as you give me piano, I can stay as long as you want. So we are quite lucky that Kunnu will stay in Taiwan for 14 days before his concert, and he will give 8 concerts for this, his paid off. And then for Yo-Yo Ma and also Daniel Trifno, they have shortened their quarantine period, but they would take more strict restriction, like they have to do the check, the COVID-19 check every 3 days to make sure that they still stay in negative. If anything goes wrong, they have to cancel all the concerts. So Yo-Yo will travel with his private jet, and Catherine Stott will travel with more than 5 business seat tickets buy for her. And like Daniel Trifno, he also traveled with more than 1 business class. And I would like to also share with you other cases, like Ray Chan, the pianist. He traveled to Taiwan and take 14 days quarantine, but he will give more than 5 concerts during his stay in Taiwan. So it's like star in a month. So Daniel has his 5 concerts, and Ray Chen has 5 concerts, and Kunnu has 8 concerts. So it's really good strategy to stay for 2 weeks, and you give more concerts in Taiwan. Next. During half of a house period, like 50% occupancy, we have some cases like there's Free Step AR project. It's an exhibition as well as a theater project. Audience can use their smartphone to scan on a QR code, and you will see dancer on your screen, and you can enjoy this online and offline or on-site and off-site immersing experience. So with the QR code, you can have the dancer whenever you are. And also this scenery of little light. It's a AR, it's a, how do you call it? Physical reaction to these devices. And we originally have it like, it's a theater piece, but the creator said, since we cannot have a full house audience, why not we do it online? So we just refund all the tickets and do it online, because it needs a different theater requirement for an online project. So it's, you can see from the photo that it's a robot, filming robot. It's an interesting project, and both projects will receive well feedback from international theater. And finally, I would like to share with you the Tropical Angel, our next musical project. This will be online script reading on November 12th, 7:30 a.m. Asian time, and this stage reading won't be happening, I mean, because of a pandemic precautions. So we are lucky that we get the support from the Musical Theater Factory in New York, and we also get the Taipei Culture Center in New York sponsor to get this online script reading. So I would like to say that we are lucky because we are very cautious on this pandemic. And I'm looking forward to receiving your feedback later. Thank you.
Joyce, thank you. Once again, that's such encouragement to a lot of us, and so interesting in the way that you're combining that digital content as well with the live performance, regardless of the fact that you can open up. It's really, really fascinating. Now, our final speaker, please welcome Margaret Yang.
Hello. Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can now, Margaret.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you, AAPPAC and FACP for having this platform. I realize that we are the only orchestra for the speakers today. So I will talk a little bit about international collaborations in terms of touring, and also for the incoming international artists. So the first slide everybody would see is all the touring that we've done since the year 2000. So obviously under 2020, we've missed all of them. So because in Hong Kong, starting from the end of January, that's actually Chinese New Year, remember, everything stopped, all the halls closed and all the flights stopped. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say, you know, it was a lockdown, but it wasn't a curfew or a lockdown. But because, like Taiwan, Hong Kong had experience from 2003 SARS. So everybody kind of knew what to do, and everybody was masked when I think Europe was still roaming free. So this is our tour all gone. And I'd like to show people what our orchestra normally looks like. It's the next slide. And this is a normal orchestra. We call it the Sinfonietta. It's smaller, it's about 55 piece. And this is from an angle where you can see how the stage is set. So although the halls were closed, I mean, there were people talking. Actually, the government was saying, if the hall reopens again, you have to have all these precautions. But in February and March, everything was still sort of up in the air, and nobody had, I don't think the experts knew quite what to do anywhere, because I think Europe was still running, USA was still running, so Hong Kong didn't quite know what to do, but to close everything. In June, actually, I think something came back. The government said, "Oh, let's open the venue to the performing arts groups to rehearse, but without audience." So can we go to the next slide? And it is the back on stage poster. We were doing something whilst we were on holiday from kind of January to May. We did something online, like what a lot of orchestras were doing. That is, the musicians stay home and they video themselves, and you know, you put it together. We did something very fancy called Project Fly, and we incorporated some of our European friends from European orchestras, and they collaborated. So that was quite fun. But I mean, you can't do that all the time, because it's, first of all, it's hard work. And second of all, it's, you know, I'm sorry to say this, but it's very fake. It's not really playing together. So when we got the chance to get back onto the stage, we just got back in and then we just filmed something, but we didn't know what we were going to do with the recording. We just filmed it. But fortunately, because of COVID, the cinemas weren't doing very well in Hong Kong either, I think. And so we got to know people at the cinema, and we said, oh, why don't we put this onto the cinema? So we had no experience on this. We're apparently the first performing arts groups in Hong Kong who've put in, you know, their own presentation. But anyway, we did it. And it's gone on for 6 screenings in Hong Kong. And cinemas opened before concert halls, although there were restrictions as well. So many people saw us, and I was surprised because I didn't know that something could be better than live, playing music live. But people at the cinema said, the audience members said, they saw our musicians up close with the masks, and they were all very moved. And so this encouraged us. And when the halls opened again, actually it opened briefly in July when we had a live concert, but with restrictions of 50 people in the, 50% of audience members. And then it finally reopened, and then it was closed for 2 months, July, August, and then September, closed for 2.5 months. And in October, it opened up again. Actually, I think it was the end of September. There was still no audience, but they again allowed the orchestra to go in without an audience. So we quickly made a decision that we will do that concert, and we will record that concert without an audience. So the next slide, you will see all the precautions that have been put in onto the stage. There's no audience here. This is taken from afterwards, but then these are better photos, so I chose these ones. So you can see the plexi fiber partitions for the woodwinds, because the first back on stage one, it was all strings. So this was a challenge. And we had a lot of warning from the government, as you can imagine. But we did that, and there are, if you look closely, it's sort of the strings are sitting sort of further apart. And I think now we even do sort of one stand to one string player, so it's even further apart. And it looks a bit squashed up, actually. But the point is, so we were going to do this, and with 2 visiting artists, both from Germany. Hong Kong is very strict, and I heard Joyce just said, you know, you can have concessions for 7 days or 14 days. Hong Kong is very strict. You have to have 14 days, and you really are stuck in a hotel, and you can't get out. And the next slide, you will see Mr. Christoph Poppin, the conductor, our principal guest conductor, and the pianist Alexander Krickel. They're both stuck in the hotel. I mean, we didn't call them every day, but what they did was they did a COVID journal, which we put up on our website and Facebook. And we have never had so many hits, and we have never had so many people sort of come read that every day. And we suddenly thought maybe this is a good thing, because, you know, orchestra websites, orchestra Facebook sites, they're always sort of rehearsal pictures and performances, and nobody's, I mean, there are people who are interested, but not so many sort of people who are not interested in classical music who want to come and see what people are doing during their COVID imprisonment. And so they came out of quarantine 14 days after, and they are in Hong Kong, you get tested twice, and if you're okay, you can get on with your business. And actually in Hong Kong, well, just a caveat point, actually no tourists are allowed. You can only enter if you have a work permit. So of course, these are working artists, so you can enter. And we recorded it, and the next one that is going to be shown on the cinema screen is called Back on Stage 2, in brackets quarantined, and it's going to be shown on the 28th of November. And this is a concert we recorded on the 26th of September. So we were thinking that maybe this is the way forward, that you can go both ways when it is live. It's now Hong Kong as of yesterday, or as of today. The capacity is now up to 75%, but you can only sit with 3 other people. So only 4 people can sit together. I don't understand the logic of this, but anyway, that's the rule. And in spite of all the sort of not excitement, but the warnings from medical experts about wind instruments, we still have our winds on stage, and so far, touch wood, we haven't had anything. But nobody can prove that if you had one of those tests that you will never get it. The test only proves that you are free from COVID at that moment. So you don't know how you can contract that. And at the City Hall Concert Hall, where we are resident, it's a very small backstage. And I think if this has to be done, everybody, not only the people performing, but the people backstage, or the backstage helpers, and who are sort of government civil servants and backstage helpers, they all have to help, and they all have to be tested. And that's what we're talking to the government about. So I think I'll stop there and get into the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Margaret. You just raised such a good point about the importance of artist care during this time, when we're all so busy pivoting, moving, being flexible, and like Amy, kind of changing our whole timelines of planning. I'm just aware, I'm waiting to see if questions are coming through in the chat, but I have one, and I think it's for a lot of, might be for Barbara and Amy, so venues and agents and producers. We've heard a lot about the increased costs, you know, whether it's health insurance, visas, you know, the cleaning that we have to do, increased medical. But we're also talking a lot about all of the different rules and regulations between countries. And for some of us, for instance, you know, even if you were allowed into our country at this particular point, you may not be able to get into another state. What are some of the venues doing to help prepare international promoters with information about the specifics of their country, and how they could help facilitate tours throughout the region when each one of our countries and states actually have different rules and regulations? What are we doing as venues to help? And from an agent perspective and a producer perspective, what would be helpful to you for us to provide? So I'm not sure whether that would be Amy, Barbara, anyone.
Everything is changing day to day, week to week. You know, Canada thought that it was opening and everybody was very good. All the venues were very good about finding cleaning solutions and regulations, and those little bubbles that Margaret was talking about, the 3 or 4 people together, which I think is supposed to describe a family or people who live under the same roof. I think that's the idea. But then suddenly the caseload started to go up, and the entire province of Quebec has closed down the venues again. So the most important thing, I think, is to stay in touch. We actually had a group that was supposed to go to Germany for a festival in October, and the Canadian embassy, despite of course their desire to see Canadians come to Germany, contacted us and said, we really recommend that you not come. We had spent some time figuring if they just went, they canceled the rest of the tour, but if they just went to this one festival and since they were not able to get health insurance that would cover COVID, we thought at the very least, and this is a little bit hedging your bets and hoping you stay lucky, at the very least, they would not have to quarantine, as Canadians at the time, they would not have to quarantine going into Europe. And if they stayed 4 days, they probably, even if they picked it up on the way over, they would probably not be symptomatic. And so they could probably get back on a plane to come back. And should they, heaven forbid, be ill, they could at least be treated in Canada where the health insurance would cover them. But I mean, the kind of strategies are complex and foolhardy. And this is maybe what I meant by artists may be too eager. I think we have to really be sane in the face of this horrific, contagious disease. So yeah, that's,
No,
I don't know if that helps.
No, thank you, Barbara. That's really helpful. Do any of the venues want to comment?
Yes, if I could briefly explain the situation in Japan. Of course, the tourists are still not allowed, and there's only special work permits for particular businesses. Now, in the case of the new opera productions in November that we're about to open, I think, as I've explained earlier, that we handpick all these singers and artists to work on our productions from different countries. So for this particular opera in November that we're about to open, they nationality-wise, we have an American, director. The singers from German, Austrian, Australian, coming from different nationalities. So what we have done was to be in close contact with the embassies of these countries and also the cultural organizations that represents the culture of these countries to get the precise information about what actually is happening. And we sought cooperations from these embassies and cultural organizations. Now, at the end, because at that time, Germany was very much encouraging their artists to be working. The ambassador of Germany and the head of Goethe Institute, which is a German cultural organization, decided to help us, so that they have worked on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan and also the Ministry of Culture of Japan, that to prove that our opera production would be will play an important part in the cultural exchange. So we have been granted visas for all these singers and creative staff coming from Europe. And I hope that this would set an example for the Japanese government to be aware of the importance of the international culture exchange. And also it would examine the exact administrative procedure of how to invite people from the industry and to enter Japan from overseas. Thank you.
That is fascinating. It leads me to my next question, which is really about that issue that you were talking about of cultural diplomacy. Do you think that cultural diplomacy has become even more important due to COVID-19? And if so, how can we facilitate that? And once again, this is probably a question for you, Amy, for Hao Ching, and maybe Joyce, just from a venue perspective, and a lot of us that are touring in that way. Has cultural diplomacy changed during this time?
Yes, definitely. Because there are always exceptions. I think we're at the very delicate transition period of could we not invite people? Now, if we just wait as a venue, we cannot, because but of course there are always exceptions, and there's always internationally important projects. We may not be able to ask for favors for a particular production, but I think we need to find a way to start inviting foreign artists to other countries. So that I think we're very much at a transitional period. What do you think, Joyce?
We didn't have much changes on this culture policy. Everything will all depend on the pandemic situation in each country. And we always has to be prepared if our artists cannot travel. So we have to have understudy for like our December production, La Boheme, our stage director, Andrea Homoki, who just got positive and he cannot travel. So we have an executive stage director from Japan who can immediately support this production. So we have to change our plan like according to the situation change. So we have to be very flexible during this period.
Absolutely. Could I just say one more thing that about Germany, as we all know, I think it was the 28th, that the whole of German theaters has announced that they're closing again for a whole month starting next Monday. So I think it's very much to do with the timing, and I think it's very much to do with how, as Joyce said, how flexible we could be. And I think there was a question about quarantine. Now, all these artists who were able to enter Japan this time did go through a 14 days quarantine, and they've just literally started rehearsing for the opera that we're about to open in November. Thank you.
And yes, if some of you haven't seen in the chat, there was a question about who paid for quarantine. So certainly in Australia, if an international artist would be coming in, it would be the presenting company who would need to fund that quarantine that is at actually a hotel as well. And I know, so now the questions come in thick and fast, and I'm going back up a little bit. One of the questions from Yvonne was basically, what is everybody's planning timelines? Do you think that you will be touring internationally in 2021? Can you plan 12 months out? Are you looking towards 2022? What are people's international touring thoughts at the moment?
Should I say something, or is somebody there? Sorry.
I just think that might be a good one for Margaret.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yes, I saw the questions. We have plans of moving. For example, we had a German tour rescheduled to 2021 in May, but it really depends. I mean, everything closed down now, as Amy said. But it's in May, so we are still. I mean, all the flights and everything from this May has been held for 2021, and we have specific dates. All the venues are still keeping all our publicity, and so it looks. I mean, everybody wants to do it, but we're not sure yet. As for the seasons, we are all playing by ear. I think all the artist agents, they know that they can't sort of put a finger down on a date and say we confirm this, but we're all sort of, it's kind of, you're talking about sort of diplomacy earlier on. It's kind of, that collaborative spirit is quite strong now. And I'm not going to name any names, but a lot of artist managers who I thought before that they were sort of quite hard to work with have become sort of much easier. And I think that's a good thing. They know who they are. And people are talking more. I mean, that's why, and it's a global thing. Unlike in 2003, when SARS was only in Asia, it was very difficult to explain to people what was wrong and why we can't do this and do that. But now everybody's in the same boat, kind of. And I think it's sort of, if we can say something good came out of COVID, maybe this is one of those.
I think that's a very, very good point. We all certainly understand now. I know Yvonne also had asked about ticket pricing. So if in fact, with these increased costs for international touring and the quarantining, are you increasing ticket prices in order to facilitate that? Or are people recognizing, especially if some of you that have reduced capacities, or are we just recognizing that that is a cost that we need to bear during this season? That's probably just a fast question from a couple of you. Yeah.
In case of the new National Theatre Tokyo, we're definitely not increasing the price of the venue because we are a national theatre, meaning a non-profit organization.
And I think that, you know, certainly in Australia, there's a price sensitivity. We're in a recession, so that is not something that we're looking to do. I know there was a question earlier, and it kind of combines in with a question that I had, which is really about during this period of time, many of us have worked much more closely with our local artists and our independent creatives, local regional artists, small to medium companies in a way that as venues or producers we might not have before. So in a post-COVID world, how do we ensure that those relationships and collaborations with local artists and creatives continue to thrive and have a place in major venues at the same time that we revitalize and renew that international touring? I think that, you know, many of us have had that kind of a forced change of focus, but it's been an important one. So I don't know if any of the venues, Hao Qing, if you'd like to discuss any of that, or Joyce?
We have several major international production canceled last summer, and we reserved the funding for our local theater troops. So we already engaged like 60 projects in their different development stage, such as for their startup for a new theater project, or the work in progress project, or prepare for stage reading. We give them funded like say $10,000 US for their development R&D funding, so they can even though they don't have production or performance going, but they still can use the fund to develop their future project. And I think that's kind of benefit from those international cancellations. And I also like to chip in a little bit about our government funding for performing art activities or industry. The government give every citizen $20 US for their spending in purchasing performing art or any art activity tickets or expenses. And I think that's quite helpful. So that's why we have like 98% of a full house in our summer season, because everybody spend their government subsidy in our performing arts.
Would anyone else like to comment on that?
Yeah, I want to just chime in that in Montreal, there's been, of course, a turn, and across North America, but in Montreal, I've seen it very closely, the turn to local artists performing when possible, but since it's not possible to perform most of the time for the last 8 months, we've seen some of the venues lend themselves when possible for residencies for artists to develop new works, exactly. And when it's able to be done with health restrictions respected, there's good technical support also for the development of these works. And in many cases, there's also video support so that there can be good promotional materials, video and audio support, so good promotional materials can emerge from these residencies. And then of course the services are free to the artists, so that's very valuable. And then of course the artists can take that and someday have international performances based on their ability to promote those works. I wanted to say one sorry, I wanted to add one totally different angle, perhaps, and that is one of the things that curious about other countries, but bringing artists to the U.S. who, of course, can't travel to the U.S., so we're bringing films of their concerts or videos that are stitched together of different pieces to create an evening of performance, which is then diffused to home screens of subscribers. What we've learned is that unlike touring to the United States, there is no taxation on the videos, on these films that are sent. So because all the work is done in the home country, not in the United States. So this has also been one of those silver linings to a grim situation, that the 30% tax, which is usually levied on a touring artist in the United States, is not applicable. And therefore, it's actually much simpler in some respects for artists to send their films to the United States and to other countries, I suspect. And also just to say that some venues have been suggesting to me that they have gotten such good feedback from their audiences about the films, as Margaret was talking about her films for the Sinfonietta, that they intend, even when they can open their venues, to continue to have videos available for either free or at a very modest rate for people who watch from home, not necessarily of a concert in the hall, but of other material, which there will now be a much larger catalog available as people are developing new film and video of their performances or about their work. And I think that that can be very healthy, because television tends not to be about culture so much as it is about television. And if we want to have an outlet for the kind of work that we're talking about, the artistry of theater, dance, and concert artists of all traditions, having the community create platforms for viewing of these well-produced videos will be, I think, a really great asset in the future.
I will unmute myself before I ask that question. Hao Qing, did you have anything to add?
Yes, I just want to comment about this. Just want to share with us about our local artists. So during at the very beginning of the break of the coronavirus, so we have several times of lockdown of the cultural activities, and everybody needs to stay at home, as you know. So our artists, our local artists, have their self-made digital programs online, and we see a lot of new productions all by themselves without any funding from the government. And this is this new production of digital program is of strong Chinese characteristics, and is highly reviewed by the young audiences on the internet. So we have found out this phenomenon, and would like to shift this online program into live show, and have invited several of the performing troops to the stage and put it on the show as the post-pandemic shows. And we found that this is very interesting, that because of the pandemic, you have found out a lot of new artists that are welcomed by the young audiences. So this have given us a good chance to look into the new development of the performing arts. So we are making our seasonal program for the next year, and we think maybe the second half of next year will be much more safe to do some international project. And so we are discussing with the international partners to see if there's any possibility to combine this creative Chinese performing troops with the international artists to make it brand new show next year.
Oh, that's brilliant. And there's a lot of comments coming through specifically about some of this online content and things that are being created and whether it is kind of available. Interestingly enough, you had talked about IP, and I know, Margaret, you used to be an intellectual property lawyer. So maybe this is a question for you as well. But, are there different challenges with these online collaborations that we're doing about intellectual property that maybe we've never had to consider before, or is it much more clear cut? I know for us in Australia, we've had interesting challenges with copyright that we hadn't expected when all of a sudden we tried to put a lot of work online. But I'm just wondering about others, and I know we're so out of time, but I just want to hear the answer to that question.
A lot of the publishers are learning. I mean, as I think they're learning as much as we are. So when we told them that we're going to put this online, and normally they would ask which day, are you streaming, how many times, for how long, and because they have the license. And I think they must be, a lot of them, they must be sort of changing their own rules of for payments and fees to accommodate the situation. And I think that again is a lot of talking going on in a collaborative manner. And I think that's the way forward. I don't think there is like a hard and fast rule as to, if you're talking about contemporary music, that's another, intellectual property thing. But I'm talking about sort of general publishers' costs of whether you're going to play this on stage or whether you're going to play it online. And I mean, it also applies to the artist managers who say sort of normally, if you record the artist and you put the thing online, the fees will be different. And we are having that conversation as well. And I think it is sort of becoming the norm or the new norm. And that's why, so we're in the midst of all this. And I think the sort of the answer, or a clear-cut answer, won't come until later.
I think you're absolutely right. And one of the other comments that's come through a couple of times is this issue that each one of us have such different regulations. And of course, all of us are walking that tightrope where at any point we could need to close or shut down for a period of time. So just from our perspective, in a group that I'm working with personally in Australia, we are working on the concept of bringing over artists and really helping to facilitate from our end, an Asia Pacific tour, so that if they're coming from Europe or the United States or something, they are not having to try to navigate the whole scenario by themselves. And that probably, especially for our international festivals, means that we will be taking some risk on it. But possibly those of us in the region can help navigate that in a way that those farther away cannot. So I feel like that's one of our responsibilities. I am aware that we are out of time. I knew that this was such a big discussion and we could talk for hours, but I want to thank you to my esteemed panel, Amy, Hao-Ching, Joyce, and Margaret, for this, and Barbara, for this fascinating and really important discussion. And thank you to all of you for your questions and participation. So I hope this has provided you with some inspiration and hope for the future of international collaborations. And now I'd like to hand you back to Douglas Gautier, Chair of AAPPAC.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks to all the panelists. Really great contribution, very insightful, and a range of a context there from the agent perspective through to the ensemble perspective, and of course the venues. All of those insights very, very useful, I think. And, we're taking temperature at a point in time, and we know that this is moving very fast. And I think it just illustrates and emphasizes how useful this dialogue is as the COVID situation changes very fast. And we will need to continue to do this, I think, as we go forward into the new year. I think everyone has accepted that and has been very happy about the fact that these webinars have been very useful and have added a new dimension of value to our organization. And it's particularly pleasing that we've been able to link up, in this case, with Joe Sadek and FACP, and I hope there'll be more of that. We just wanted to emphasize that there is a WebEx meeting next week for FACP, hosted by National Kaohsiung Center for the Arts. And you can go online and take a look at the conference schedule and speakers. And look, we're happy to talk about that and promote it, because I think the more that we can do together here and understand what are the circumstances that we're facing, compare notes, but also to understand the opportunities opening up for us, not only in terms of, say, green track travel bubbles, where we might be able to look on a bilateral basis in terms of touring or sharing work, or as Liz was pointing out, something that we are talking about in Australia in terms of bringing artists through, say, from Europe or America, and then bringing them through various Asian destinations that we could share with, and equally looking, to bring artists from those travel corridors that are open to us, and hopefully that would be a two-way flow. It's really terrific to see members from FACP on this webinar, because after all, at the end of the day, we are a collaborative industry, and we can't work without you. The venues can't work without you. That's why we have a business circle. It's why we're reaching out to FACP, and it's why I think that symbiotic discussion that Joe and I are having at chair level, at least, and our committees, try and see where we can work more together in the future is important too. I should also acknowledge colleagues from the National Centre for Performing Arts in Mumbai who are on the call on the web today. We thank them for being with us, and I think many of us would feel that we would love to know more about what's going on in South Asia in our industry, and particularly about that great centre in Mumbai, and we look forward to doing that hopefully next year. What I'd say to you is let's get some ideas back to the Secretariat, who I also need to thank for the work that they've set up for this. But we want your ideas in terms of the subject matter that you would find useful for us discussing next year with these webinars, because we most certainly plan to continue them. We think they're extremely useful. That has been the feedback. But what are the subjects that you think are most useful for you to hear about? Is it financing under the current circumstances? Is it still those touring possibilities? Is it comparison of safety measures? All of those sorts of things. I think sharing is really a valuable function for our organisation. So once again, thanks to the panelists, thanks to FACP, thanks to Liz Hawkins, thanks to all the members and people who've been on board for this webinar and for the other series, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Stay safe and let's keep talking. Thank you.